All right, everybody. We're going to get started with today's program in just a moment. You can still join us. Grab a seat on the first, second, or third floors of the Daily Planet Theater for the Lunchtime Discovery Series. Today we're hearing about whales, or rather a whale, a very special whale. Our program will begin momentarily inside the globe. I got number 6. That's what I'm going to hand.
Oh, let me.
All right, everybody, let's get started. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, and welcome to the SCCU Daily Planet Theater. My name is Chris Smith, and I'm your host for the Lunchtime Discovery Series. It's great to be with you all. It's another edition of our interesting, exciting, and all-around great program. The Lunchtime Discovery Series is brought to us here at the museum by the folks in the Office of Environmental Education. They do the great work of coordinating the program, asking people to come to the museum and do presentations and to be a part of this show. And every Wednesday at noon or around noon, we gather here in this space and online in order to meet interesting people and hear about what's going on in the world in science, nature, education, art, and more. We've got a fantastic month of programs, by the way. Last week, we heard from the museum's research curator for mammals, Dr. Mike Cove. Today, we are sticking with the theme of museum research and museum scientists with Lisa Gatens. Lisa is the collections manager for mammals, so Lisa's job is to take care of all of the mammals in the entire museum, whether you see them on exhibit or whether they're hiding down in the basements, hidden away. Lisa keeps track of all of that stuff and makes sure that when scientists and other researchers come to the museum, they can take full advantage of all of the scientific opportunities that we can provide. And today, I'm happy to have Lisa on stage because we're going to hear the story of one very special animal. So one animal, one story, but one that I think it's a fantastic story because there's so much to learn from it. So we'll get into it. Let's get started. Everybody put your hands together and welcome Lisa Gatens.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Can you hear me? Okay. Thanks a lot, Chris. I am happy to be here talking about what surely everyone considers the best exhibit in the museum. Well, I do anyway. And a very special specimen to me. And I will tell you why as we work through this. The story of one North Atlantic right whale. The scientific name is Eubelina glacialis, and I don't expect you necessarily to remember that, but you're going to see some abbreviations at some point, and that's where it comes from. And I want to tell you up front, I'm a big bag of gushiness, so I might choke up, seriously. This presentation has some pretty sad parts to it. It is inherently sad. And I'll do my best to provide some positive information in there too. So if there's a point in the presentation that you find especially sad and maybe hard to hear, hang on, because there's going to be something else coming. And for full disclosure, I don't want to mislead anyone about my expertise that I may or may not have regarding whales and whale research. I will be sharing with you a little bit of information I have learned about the North Atlantic right whales, and I'm going to use the term just right whale going forward, with special attention given to one specimen that I've developed a very special relationship with. And when I am not in our research collection, I might be out catching bats or small mammals, and that is where my real expertise lies. But I do know a little bit about right whales, and I'm happy to share some of that with you here today. So whales are kind of divided into two groups, the ones that have teeth and the ones that have baleen, and this determines how they feed and what they eat. The toothed whales are called odontocetes, and the baleen whales are mystocetes, and they have plates of baleen, which you're going to see here in a little bit, that they filter things out of the water. This is the most technical graph or slide we're going to have all day or during this presentation. And this shows the breakdown of the number of species within each family of the group of mammals called cetaceans, and that includes dolphins and whales. And the dolphins and porpoises make up about half of all cetaceans. And if you look on those four little, I can't turn around and look up, I'll get real dizzy. Those four pieces of the pie up there that have little hash marks in it, those are the baleen whales. And if you'll notice, the little numbers on the outside are the number of species in each of those families. So it's not a very large group of animals. The ones we're going to focus on is the family Balenidae, and they have 4 species. Those are the right whales. North Atlantic right whales are large baleen whales. Adults can be 50 feet or so in length, and calves are around 14 feet at birth. They have short pectoral fins. I don't have a pointer, do I? Oh, I do. Is this a pointer? before I mess up? Sweet. Okay. Okay, thank you. Short pectoral fins, and they're mostly black with some patches of white there on the belly, and some white patches, and the callosities on their heads. Callosities are formed from the presence of whale lice, and they have unique patterns and aid in the identification of individuals. Because there are so few right whales, efforts are made to identify and catalog each one to allow scientists to closely monitor the population and their status. And as we'll see shortly, they live very close to the coast, which contributed to their name. They were considered the right whale to hunt. They were easy to hunt and harvest. Some estimates, there were only around 100 individuals in the late 1800s. And before there were ever any efforts taken to, any conservation efforts, it was recognized that the populations were declining. And so the international prohibition on whaling was established in the early 1900s. In 1972, the Marine Mammal Protection Act was passed, which affords protection to all marine mammals, including cetaceans, polar bears, seals, everything falls under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And this is governed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then the Endangered Species Act, also governed by Fish and Wildlife, provides protection to all threatened and endangered species. We'll explore more about the habits, habitats, and biology of the right whale and learn more about factors that have led to their being critically endangered. More than 90% of the remaining 350 to 370 individuals live along the East Coast. And if you see the dark blue area, this is where they occur. And they migrate close to the shore, south to the winter calving grounds off of Georgia and Florida, and then they follow the coast again, staying really close to the shore, to their summer feeding grounds off of New England and Nova Scotia. And what is not shown on this particular map are the very busy ports of Baltimore, Norfolk, Boston, and et cetera. And also included in this area where right whales migrate are big lobster, crab, and other fisheries. And we're going to look into this more in a little bit. I want to point out something about the time scale on this map, and this is a map of the population of right whales from 1990 on. So prior to I am not on the right slide. How am I not on the right slide? I'm seeing something on my screen that isn't up here. Sorry. So I don't know what you've seen. Okay. Let me back up and see what. Okay, the map. Oh, really? Okay. Okay, sorry. So as I understand, people who are watching online, which is the bulk of the audience, are seeing what I can see on my laptop, but you all are seeing the frozen screen. My apologies. So hopefully we'll get you caught up. What you're not seeing, people here in the auditorium, is a graph that shows the population over time, beginning with a sort of a flattened period of slow to no growth, leading up to the late 1990s, or leading up to 1990. There was an estimated, like I think I said this already, only about 100 at the lowest. And during this period, the population remained fairly flat until the Marine Mammal Protection Act and Endangered Species Act were passed, and we saw a, yay, a kind of slow and steady increase over time. And along the x-axis, the bottom axis here, those are 5-year increments. And then since 2017, this is an ongoing thing. This is described as an unusual mortality event where 20% of the population was affected. Leading up to this, I have firsthand from one of our North Carolina whale experts who really does study whales, that people were really starting to feel optimistic because of the increase in the population that we see prior to this unusual mortality event. And then, you know, things happened. But, whoops, I don't know what I just did. Now my screen went weird. Okay, I don't know. At the end of 2023, we were at an estimated 372 individuals. So there is a slight positive trend that we're starting to see. So that's a good thing. And I was just sent this information yesterday. Thank you, Keith, who's tuning in. So far this year, we had 20 calves born, and you can see that that's a pretty significant number compared to some past years. So also some good news for this species. But now we get to talk about the causes of declines. There's plenty more than this, but the two big ones are, entanglement in fishing gear and collisions with big ships. We're going to look a little bit at entanglement first. So this graphic shows one way that right whales can become entangled in fishing gear. And while this graphic depicts lobster or crab traps, other types of in-use or discarded, what is referred to as ghost gear, can also pose a threat. Right whales are skim feeders, so they swim at the surface of the water with their mouths open. And it's not hard to imagine how easily it would be for them to pick up rope in their mouths, or as this graphic shows, get it wrapped around their tails or around their flippers. Entangled whales can tow fishing gear for months or years before they manage to free it themselves, before scientists are able to release it from them, or until they succumb. This is one of the really, dang it, sad parts. So imagine just sitting, you're on a raft in a pool, and you're just doing this with your fingers. Imagine that resistance, right? It's not easy, right? Imagine you put your whole arm in and you're doing this. Imagine pulling 100 feet of rope and a buoy and a trap while you're trying to swim. So the effect of entanglement is great. And even when they are freed, it has a lasting effect. They don't immediately recover from the stress of that, and it affects their ability to feed and reproduce and be healthy going forward. It can, sorry. In 2017, coast with rope coming out of either side of the mouth. Right here, you can see rope. And pulling a fishing net behind it. And biologists from several federal and state agencies worked to free the gear from this young male. Now, this is one of the happy parts. It has since been spotted several times, including 2023, and seemingly recovered from these injuries. So this is a good thing. And what does it mean to try to free a whale from entangled fishing gear? It means people approach this very large, frightened animal in very small boats and try to cut the rope loose. And there are obvious dangers to all involved, and I think the efforts are absolutely nothing short of heroic. Another thing that's being done to help scientists identify origins of lobster or crab ropes is color coding. The big pictures show a combination of color codes for both federal fishing permits and state issued permits. And then the little picture up in the top shows some individual fisher identifiable to a particular fisher person in a region. And this isn't to point fingers at people, this is to provide information as to the where and when that a whale could have been entangled, and this is going to help with conservation issues. And the people who use the colored rope understand this, and none of them want to participate or contribute to the decline. One of the two more things that are being done to help with this issue, one of which I'm pretty excited about, and the other one is sort of a, well, duh. On-demand gear. This is so cool. This is some of the exciting new technology which greatly reduces the amount of rope used. And the traps are retrieved. If you look along the bottom, there are examples of different kinds of on-demand traps. They're retrieved by someone on a boat pushing a button, and which activates the buoyant, either the pop-up buoy, the inflatable bag, or the floating spool, which brings the trap to the, well, it doesn't bring the trap to the surface, it shoots those up to the surface, and then the fishermen on the boat can pull the trap up to retrieve their crabs or lobsters. And so this is exciting new technology, and as often the case with new technology, it is expensive, and so hopefully this is going to become cost-effective, because there's a lot of hope in this. I think this is a fantastic thing, and I hope that going forward, it's going to be used widely. So the Marine Debris Act was passed in 2006 and amended again as recently as 2020. And this act enables NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to deal with huge problem of marine debris. You're probably aware of the giant garbage patches in our oceans. And there are smaller bits of trash elsewhere. It's a huge problem. And so this includes, marine debris includes not only derelict fishing gear, but refuse from hurricanes and tsunamis, and lots of other stuff in between, stuff we might leave on the beach unintentionally. This is all marine debris, and it poses a big problem. And the Marine Debris Act allows for the study of and to fund grassroots efforts to clean and to educate people about the dangers of the 23 million metric tons of trash in the ocean and our Great Lakes. So this is another thing that's being done to help. So now we'll look at the other leading cause of decline in whale populations, and specifically the North Atlantic right whale. And I'll be sharing with you a bit of my personal experience with a right whale that was killed by a ship collision. We've already seen images and the one graphic showing the distribution map along the eastern seaboard. In the middle of this picture, you'll see the back of a right whale with the big ship and then the crane there in the background. This is the high density traffic area of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel area. This fun graphic is made using tracking technologies both on the ships and on this young one-year-old calf, the little red dot that's migrating up from Baltimore up toward Long Island. And if you look at the clock and calendar at the top, it starts on March 7th and goes through March 13th of 2021. And this gives an idea of the heavy traffic areas that these whales migrate through and forage in and try to raise calves in. I think it's a fun and engaging graphic, but kind of drives the point home. And there he goes again. You see the little red dot. He's up there at New York, heading out Long Island. we'll let it finish its migration, and then we'll move on. So not all ship collisions or entanglements, like I said, are fatal. And in some instances, the wounded individuals heal and get another chance. And remember that I said that because there are so few individual right whales, that efforts are made to identify each and every one. And they're cataloged in the New England Aquarium Right Whale Catalog and assigned a number, a catalog number. They're given a nickname, often based on some physical or behavioral characteristic. And for the big pile of gosh, that's all I am, I swear. For the rest of the talk, I'll be sharing my personal experience with a right whale with the nickname Stumpy and how I came to know her. Her nickname came from the missing part of her right fluke right here. And so when she was first spotted in 1975, this bit of tail was missing. And this is a screenshot from the New England Aquarium Right Whale Catalog that documents her first occurrence, the first time they spotted her and added her to the catalog. You can also see, if you look down through there, it has the year and the month and the day of the month that she was spotted and whether or not she had a calf. And this particular bit of the catalog shows that she had 2 calves. This is just part of her catalog information. So she was a healthy reproductive female. Even though that showed 2 calves, she had 5 known calves and was approximately 40 years old in 2004 and was carrying her 6th known calf. On February 7th, a report of a dead right whale off of Virginia Beach was made. Whenever a dead whale is seen, the report is sort of required and people respond. Sue Barco from the Virginia Marine Science Museum responded to this one. And when it was, God bless, this is ridiculous, I am sorry. Someone else is gonna have to come talk. When it was confirmed that this particular dead right whale was EG 1004, our beloved Stumpy, it has been told to me by the people who knew her for those 30 years and watched her give calves and be a healthy reproductive female, that they grieved. Sue, her efforts were also heroic. This shows a calm sea, but this was early February and it wasn't calm when she responded, and she went out in one of those little bitty boats like we saw in that other picture and attached a tracking buoy so that as she floated southwards or drifted southwards, her location could be monitored. So she was first spotted off Virginia Beach and drifted southward to Nag's Head, and the Marine Mammal Stranding Network had responded and was ready to go to Nag's Head and deal with this animal, do the necropsy, study her. And the person in charge at Nag's Head decided that this individual, this large whale floating very close to the shore, presented potential threat to their pier and hired a boat to haul her out into open water. I don't know how this person didn't get in trouble. Anyway, so she had the tracking buoy. She continued to float south, or drift south, and was finally brought to shore just at the very just before the Oregon Inlet, where she likely could have drifted out into open water again. And when I say just before Oregon Inlet, it was right there. Very, very close. So that was good. At that time, Stumpy was the 2nd largest right whale documented, and it took a great deal of effort and heavy machinery to pull her up the beach to get her above high tide line. Here are members of the stranding network I feel terrible that I know who one of these people is and don't know the other. It's Bill McClellan in the orange at UNC Wilmington. But anyway, they're working to get her secured, to get her up out of the surf so the necropsy and additional studies could happen. So she was first spotted dead on February 7th, and this is now a few days later. I had been away for the weekend, so February 7th of 2004 was a Saturday. When I got back to my office on that Monday, I had several calls from Michael Moore at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute saying there was a dead right whale on our coast, and did the museum want it? I was finally able to respond, and after some ridiculous delays, I was able to leave Raleigh, and I joined them on the beach on Wednesday. And when I got there, the necropsy was well underway. Necropsy is an autopsy on animals, in case you don't know that. To do a necropsy, the carcass had to be cut. This is a little gruesome, and I apologize, and I'm trying to not be overly gruesome. The carcass was cut into 3 sections, and on right whales, the head is almost a third of the body length, so that was one section, and then the part of the body with the ribs, and then the back part where it's just the vertebral column. So when I got there, this was the status. And while it might be a bit gruesome, this image gives an idea of the size of right whales and of this one in particular. And I've omitted some of the necropsy photos, but want to explain that they're on the beach, and it was cold and windy, and everyone was being pelted with little bitty grains of sand and salt. That so many measurements and samples are taken, and so many observations are recorded. So much information was acquired these days on the beach. And I also want to point out the baleen, which is clearly visible in this picture. Baleen plates are, I didn't fail to say this earlier, baleen is made out of the same stuff that your hair and fingernails are made from. It's keratin. And it is lined up in little bitty plates next to each other, close to each other on the upper jaw. So she's upside down. So the baleen is sticking up on that side of the picture. The head was the last part of the necropsy, and when the skin was cut back, it was revealed the damage to her head. This is a page from the necropsy report, and it shows the places here. This is the rostrum, or the nose. It's just like the part that sticks out on your dog. If you don't have a dog, go get one. And it says right here that the rostrum was completely severed and pointed to a fatal ship strike. Jump ahead. So, oh, this was cute. My part on the beach, so I went to retrieve this specimen. Now she's a specimen. And I had a pickup truck and a trailer. And my help on the beach is really kind of comical. Working with people who respond to marine mammal strandings, these people are so good at what they do, and every action is so precise, and there is no wasted effort. And so I tried to help, but mostly I needed to stay out of the way and load bones onto the trailer to bring back to Raleigh. It's an amazing thing to get to witness and watch these people work, because while I have the luxury of standing here and choking up from time to time, they're choking up while they're doing this, and they do. I promise they do. We all feel this real big. So I bring her back what I could fit, and then we hired a truck to bring the skull and the other heavy bits that were too large for me to bring back with me. Now, this is now the location of our Prairie Ridge Eco Station. This is behind the research lab on Reedy Creek. This is, oh, in the background there is Edwards Mill. For you local folk, over here is Edwards Mill, and there's lots of development on this side and over here too. We erected a sort of temporary fence. We laid some weed control cloth down, put the skeleton out, and began to bury her in horse manure. We get horse manure from the vet school horse barn, which is about a half a mile up the road, or from the state fairgrounds horse barn, which is about a half mile the other direction. And this is a real handy relationship because both of those places accumulate a lot of horse poo, and they don't need it, and we use horse poo. So it's this nice symbiotic relationship that we have with them. How we clean specimens in horse manure, and we do this with any large specimen, it is basically composted. We cover it in horse manure, and the anaerobic bacteria present in the manure cleans the bones for us, and honestly, they come out clean. You bury something in poop and it comes out clean. It works, I promise. The only thing we do once we take it out is wash it with soap and water. If it's greasy, whale bones usually are, they get washed with Dawn. If they're not greasy, they get washed with ivory liquid. So this is all we do. They look especially white here because they're out in the bright sun, but you're gonna see the natural color of the bone. They're not bleached at all. We don't leave it in the sun long enough for them to be damaged because sun is very damaging. So this is out behind the research lab. After they were washed, after they were retrieved from manure, we bring them up here, we wash them, we lay them out to dry, we put them in a trailer to kill any insects that might be hiding, and then she was brought down to the research collection so that you can see the natural color of the bone here. It wasn't at all bleached. Some of them that might have been more exposed to sun over time are whiter than others. And so she stayed on B level in the other building, the basement of the other building, for several years. And there she was available to researchers during that time. And on this shelf, so this is the vertebral column and more of it here. This is the bones from one of her flipper, which is the same bones that are in her arm. And I am pleased that while she was down in the research collection, researchers did come and take various measurements on her bones, and they were used elsewhere. And so she definitely contributed to conservation, and I'm going to explain how in just a little bit. When this building was being planned, the director of that time had a vision for this specimen, thankfully, and wanted to exhibit her here. And pictured here are Dan Dendanto and Courtney Vachereau of Whales and Nails. Isn't that a great name for a company that articulates whale specimens? And because Dan had visited our collection to use specimens to make models for other installations that he was doing, I knew of his work and expertise. And Dan is a whale researcher and intimately familiar with the anatomy and how they're supposed to fit together. And so I'm really glad that we were able to contract him for this project. So we loaded all of the skeletal parts onto carts in the collection, moved it into the freight elevator, brought it up to our loading dock, put it on a U-Haul for Dan to take back to Maine with him. And if it isn't obvious yet, this makes me really happy. I've handled each of these bones multiple times, multiple times. And then a year or so later, Dan returned to do the installation while the NRC, this building, was still under construction. The shell was done, but the inside definitely doesn't. There were just bare concrete floors. And so what he did at his shop in Maine was assemble bits, and then those bits came back and were put together. I want to point out some of why his work is so beautiful. If you look, let's see, in this section here, you can actually see the rebar that is connecting the ribs to the vertebra. And he drills holes into the bones and inserts the rebar in the position that he wants them. And the part that's visible he covers with a putty so it's hidden. So all of the hardware that is holding this magnificent skeleton together is hidden from view. And if you compare the aesthetics of this one to some of the specimens in our other wing that are older specimens. I mean, again, it just highlights Dan's expertise and how good at what he does. And for the week that they were here working on that installation, they let me hang out with them and be part of the crew. Again, I was about as helpful as I am on the beach during the necropsy, but it's an experience and I'm forever grateful for, and I love these people, and I'm glad to call them friends now. So the final product is this lovely specimen on exhibit for you all right here. She's right behind you. Why is the loss of a female so devastating? Because of the estimated 372, only about 70 of them are females. So the loss of a healthy reproductive female is a hefty blow to the population. And I was honored to have worked alongside colleagues in our exhibits department here to develop this exhibit more than 10 years ago. And with the completion of the Dueling Dinosaurs lab right here beside us, we'll be revamping the platform that's beneath Stumpy and the information around her. And I am excited. I was super pleased with this exhibit as it is now, and I'm really excited about how it's going to be transformed, because we're updating some of the technologies that are used to study whales, and the status of populations. It's going to be addressed out here. It's going to be really good. And I want to point out some of the things that on this committee that I was on in developing this exhibit, again, with my fantastic colleagues in our exhibits section, Wendy Lovelady and Jane Eckenrode. A couple things that I sort of fought for. We don't want our visitors to be overly uncomfortable and feel that everything is gloom and doom. I fought for having her broken rostrum not repaired. Our exhibit staff could have repaired it so that the break wasn't visible and you would never have known. I think it's an important part of her story. If you look on this mandible here, that shows some of the research that was done on her bone, where that part was cut into sections to go into a CT scan to measure bone density, and those little holes were little plugs that were taken out that were subjected to compression tests, and this information is all on the platform around the exhibit. And all of this was done by a then grad student, Regina Campbell Malone, who wanted to answer, what does it take to break a whale? Why are ship collisions fatal, and do they have to be? And one last thing that I want to, well, maybe two things I want to point out before I move on real quick. I said that she had 5 known calves and was pregnant with her 6th. It was a near-term male, and he's also exhibited with her. And then lastly, on this end of the skeleton is a banner of a model of what her fluke looked like with the missing outer portion on the right side. This damage, this injury, is likely from a previous ship strike. On the upper surface of those vertebrae back near her tail fluke, there's some healed damage, which isn't visible from underneath, but she spent time in the collection, and that was studied. And so where she got her nickname, Stumpy, very well was from a previous ship encounter. Someone needs to ask me when we get to the question section why they don't avoid ships, because I have an answer. So, as a result of Regina's work and her testimony before Congress, there were regulations passed that required a reduction in ship speed in critical right whale habitat. And critical right whale habitat, if you remember that map from several slides ago, was their migration route along the East Coast, their calving grounds in the winter, and their feeding grounds. It's where they are when they're there. That's the critical right whale habitat. And so when they're present, ships have to reduce speed. And this worked. After this was passed, there were no right whale deaths attributed to ship strikes for quite a while. And just imagine, I don't think anything I'm ever going to do in my career is going to have that kind of immediate and amazing impact to conservation. So, also a very good thing. So, oh, I'm going to skip that, sorry. Wait a minute, let me back up. Bear with me for a second. Okay, we did talk about that. Sorry. Now, that's all I'm going to say about her. I wanted to say, however, looking forward, in June, next summer, June 2025 through January of 2026, we're going to have our traveling exhibit in the special exhibits hall in the other building. Is going to be on blue whales. And I know I've just been talking about right whales, but, you know, they're also baleen whales. And we're going to, as we do with our special exhibits, we'll add our own pieces of information and our own touch to this special exhibit. And I'm really excited about it. Everything that I've seen thus far is going to be amazing. And I'm really excited that we're bringing back the special lecture series in conjunction with this special exhibit. And so we're going to have special presentations by real whale researchers and who are working on various aspects of their biology and ecology and conservation and evolution, and it's going to be great. So please watch for more information about that. And I will do my best to answer questions.
Thank you
these are
very
Stumpy's
much.
ribs, by the way, that I'm squatting in the middle of.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Amazing stuff. Stumpy's story is just incredible. It's so moving, but so special, especially in the way that the skeleton contributed to the research and the way the research contributed to conservation.
I know.
And the way that I think that story continues to play out because the speed limit rules you mentioned are constantly under review and votes for expansion. And so there's always more work to be done. And this story continues to play such an important role in it.
Yeah, I absolutely, Chris. And right. As devastating as her loss was, what she's contributed to the possible conservation of the species is just, yeah, it's amazing. And I'm sorry I'm so gushy, people.
I think that's okay. I think that's okay. We're okay with it. So if you're in the room with me and you've got questions, just wave at me. If you're on the balconies, wave down. I'll bring you a microphone, or you can yell at us wherever you have to be. And if you're watching online, I've got you pulled up right here. I've got the chat going so that I can see your questions as well. We'll get started here in the room with one in the back.
What's the lifespan of the northern right whale? And of that lifespan, how many of those years would a female normally be producing young?
That's a real good question, Jerry. I hope I'm going to not totally mess this up. I don't know that I know the exact lifespan, but a lot of the great whales can live 100 years. And I don't know that we know exactly longevity for right whales. So she was around 40 and was reproductive and was expecting to continue to be for a while, right? One thing that happened as a result of, I forgot to mention this, when the numbers were so low prior to any conservation measures ever being taken before the Marine Mammal Protection Act, as we've seen in lots of other species that have come close to the brink of extinction, like cheetahs and some other things, and they go through a genetic bottleneck, and the individuals that are left often don't have the best genetic complement, right? And so what people are seeing is that there's a reduction in size in right whales. This isn't what you ask, but they're getting smaller. And the time between reproductive events is getting longer. So they're not necessarily reproducing as quickly as they could. And there are other stressors contributing to this, right? I want to think, and I apologize if I get this wrong, and maybe one of the real researchers listening can correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say they can produce a calf every 4 or 5 years. These are numbers I've seen, whether or not I'm telling you the truth.
Thank you. So another one, let's see. There's a question that came in online, kind of related. Glenn wanted to know, are there so many more males than females because of birth ratios, or do females have a higher mortality rate? Because Lisa, you mentioned that there are only about 70 females expect or thought to be out of around 370 or so individuals.
I don't know the answer to that. Like, are females more likely to be killed? I don't know the answer to that. Again, I feel like the real whale researchers would have some insight to respond as to whether or not their behaviors would make them more susceptible. I don't know the answer to that. So without that, my guess is it's just by chance they're having more males. Yeah, sorry. I just realized there was something I wanted to share. Oh, I forgot to point out, this is actually one of Stumpy's calves with her calf. So this was, I forget what year this picture was taken. But anyway, so her genes are out there. I just realized I kind of skimmed over this because I thought it was another picture that I had meant to remove. Yes?
So, okay, this picture's a good one for this question. How long do the bones stay in the manure until they come out clean?
So it depends. When a lot of what I brought back on the beach, when they do the necropsy, there was very little left on some of these bones. However, on the tail fluke, which doesn't have really a lot of bone in it, and on the flippers, those were kind of entire. So they were mostly still covered in skin and muscle and whatnot, and they just went in like that. So those take a little bit longer to clean. She was buried for more than a year. I want to say these are records I probably have written down somewhere. Probably more than 2 years that she was buried because there wasn't a huge rush. If this was a smaller animal with more fragile bones, there would be a threat to leaving it buried that long because the bones are going to break down. Thankfully, this isn't what happened here. But so it depends on the size of the individual, how clean, how much is left on the bones when they're buried, as to how long it needs to be in.
And can you tell me a little bit about the process for having Regina Campbell-Malone, now Dr. Campbell-Malone, come and use the parts of the skeleton? Did she come here and do the research? Did we put them on a truck and send them somewhere? How does that work out so that somebody can borrow a whale's bones in order to chop them into pieces?
Some of the pictures that I didn't include on the beach during the necropsy, Regina was actually there. And so things went with her back to Woods Hole. So the bones, the ones that she took, stayed up there for a while. And then when she was finished, a couple of people who work here volunteered, like, hey, this sounds like a fun road trip. We'll go get these bones for you. And so after Regina was finished with her research, then actually Paul was one of those people.
Next up from the chat, can you tell us what your educational background is? What brought you to mammalogy at the museum?
Oh, gosh. Well, yes. I have a master's in biology from a little school that no one's heard of. I shouldn't present it this way. I am originally from West Virginia, and I got my master's at Marshall University. There I studied shrews, and so it's just a real quick leap from our smallest terrestrial mammals to whales. It's the obvious next step. No, I was fortunate while I was in grad school there that I worked in the collection, and I had done field work studying small mammals, out where they live. They don't always come in the form of skeletons. There's a life before that. And when I went to grad school and was assigned to work in our collection there, that's when everything that I did in the field, it's like this big light bulb went off, and I'm like, oh, this is why we do what we do. And the collections and how collections are used and what they're for and their value it just really clicked with me. And I was just immensely grateful that once I finished, I applied to some places and got an interview, and here I am, 25 years later.
Doing great work. All right, I'm going to look around the room one more time. Here we go. 2 more questions, one in the room and then one from the internet.
I might have missed this, but that mortality event in 2017, do we know the causes?
That was labeled an unusual mortality event in that there were multiple individuals over a period of years. And there were, I wish I could remember anything more than about 10 seconds, because I did read up on this. It wasn't a single thing. It wasn't like a red tide and, you know, there was a big kill-off. It's nothing like that. It was just one thing after another. There were ship strikes. There were entanglements. There were just things, you know, disease. Coincidentally happening, and kind of a blow. Again, the real whale researchers, you know, talked to me recently about how excited they were, that upward trend that we saw on that graph. Like, oh my gosh, we can actually, this is fantastic. And then he said, this is Bill McClellan at UNC Wilmington, you know, it was like a punch in the gut, you know, to see this happen. It's like, dang it, man, we thought we were, you know, we thought we were past this. And so we got this little upward trend again.
Thank you.
And Lisa, you said we should ask you, why don't the whales avoid ship strikes?
This is a question I get asked so often when I talk about her in particular, because, I mean, this is the whale I know. So the ships, we know the size of container ships, right? They are not small. Why don't they get out of the way? I love the quick and easy answer, and this is something I've only recently learned, and it's really cool, but I'm going to give you the long one anyway. First of all, this is their migration route. This is an inherent thing. This is something they've been doing for millennia, right? This northward, southward, along the East Coast migration, before there were giant ships doing this. So it's ingrained to them to be there. And they don't know to look out for these giant things. But here's the short answer and the really cool part. They have terrible vision. I only just learned this. Isn't that fantastic? It's interesting. It's not fantastic they have terrible vision. They don't need excellent vision for what they do. But I think it was described that they would, if they were people, they would be considered legally blind. So, and they can also hear them, of course, but yet, just imagine the confusion that this giant noisemaker thing, and you don't know exactly where it is. They're moving fast, hence the ship speed regulation. Neither the whale nor the ship can, you know, navigate or spin so quickly to avoid one another. The whale more so than the ship. But it's just that they don't know to, and they can't see it. They have terrible vision.
Aw, poor guys.
I'm sorry. And I'm smiling.
I've always wondered too, because doing programs here at the museum, I've had opportunity to talk with people about Stumpy as well, and I get the same question. And I always wondered if the metaphor of like, have you ever heard of somebody or seen somebody almost step into traffic?
Yeah. Oh,
Just
right.
stepping off a curb,
Right.
cars are on the street, and then it's almost it's not quite the same thing, but sort of like, why don't the whales move? Well, I don't know. Why did Chris almost just walk into traffic?
Squirrels.
Why do squirrels run
Doing
into
this?
the street?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so much a part of just the eons of biology
Right.
and evolutionary history, and the ships are the new thing that are getting in the way.
Right. They don't, and yeah.
And then there's other whale research that talks about that I've seen where like ocean noise is so overwhelming and all-encompassing that they can't even like hear a ship coming.
Right, because
Because
there's so
they're
much
so
other,
loud.
exactly, yes, yes. So imagine if you're stepping into traffic and there's just tremendous noise all around you and someone beeps their horn, are you going to even hear that, you know, or is there so much other extraneous noise that it doesn't register? Yeah, it's sad.
Well, Lisa, thanks for being with us today. Thanks for sharing about North Atlantic right whales, their story, and the ways that the museum and you have been involved in the story. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much.
It's great stuff. Everybody, thanks for participating in today's program. We hope you'll be here next week as well. We've got another museum program for you. We're going to have another museum scientist here on stage in the theater to share their stories with us. So don't miss out. That's next Wednesday at noon for the Lunchtime Discovery Series. You can get information all about next week and future programs at eenorthcarolina.org. Until next time, be well, stay safe, go read about North Atlantic right whales, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.